Hey guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. So today I'm going to be talking about how I wrote my query letter, the query letter that got me a literary agent. I've been trying to film this video for so long. I posted my video about how I got my agent literally like last spring. I think it was like June, and I said that this would be the next video. When I tell you that I have filmed this video 4 times, I kid you not, I filmed it and then the footage got corrupted and then I filmed it again. And there was a bunch of background noise, filmed it again, and I forgot to turn my mic on, and then I filmed it a final time pretty recently, and I was like, this is it. And then my SD card broke. Can't import the footage. So if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'll do, but it won't be pretty. I don't know. The universe was like, you will not tell people how you wrote your query letter. Today, I'm just gonna be running through how I wrote my query letter. If you wanna see my story about how I got my literary agent, I'll leave that video linked in the cards. I was contacted by an agent who found me from a literary prize, and that was just like not the right fit. They gave me an R&R, but I didn't like their notes. So then I started querying the book. Just one day I sent the query out to 2 agents. One of those agents got back to me like almost immediately. I ended up signing with her. So I know a lot of people when they talk about their query letter are able to talk about their stats and, you know, their request rate and stuff. I don't really have that because I signed with an agent the first time I ever sent this query letter out, which is kind of amazing, but sometimes the stars align. I'm just gonna talk about how I wrote that query letter. I had a pitch for my book that I'd been refining for years. I had a bio. So for me, this query letter assembled really easily, but I essentially already had all of the material. And so it was just a matter of bringing it all together and putting it in the right format. Honey Vinegar, which is the book for the query letter that I'm going to show you in a minute, was the first book I ever queried. I'd never queried, but I'd written like 9 books before that and I never queried any of them. And then when I got to Honey Vinegar, I spent like over 2 years editing it. I'm working on a few books right now, and I think that of all of them, Honey Vinegar does pitch the best because it's pretty clearly within the genre that it is. You know, it's a literary fiction novel, and I think it pretty clearly is what it is. It's not like going off the rails doing some weird thing like experimental or, you know, genre bendy or weird, which is fine, and I love experimental or genre bendy, but this one's pretty clearly the genre it is, but I think it also does stand out and has like an original pop to the concept. And so, you know, that wasn't intentional. It's not like I was like, I'm gonna focus on this book and query this book because it queries the best. That's just how it ended up working out. But I do think of all the books that I'm actively working on, this one does query the best. It worked out well that that's the one that I was putting time into to be the book that I was going to query. Let's just talk about the actual query letter. I'm just going to go through this paragraph by paragraph. I just opened by personalizing the query letter. So in this case, I was querying my agent. Dear Rachel Latofsky, a summer storm crackles through the mountains. It's 1955 in a remote logging town where 13-year-old Sybil is reunited with her estranged mother and half-sister Freya as they flee her mother's dissolving marriage. When Freya gets struck by lightning, Sybil uses her gift for herbalism to save Freya's life. When you're writing a query letter, you can kind of start one of 2 ways. You can either start by basically saying to the agent, like, I'm sending you this manuscript, it's this genre, it's this word count, I'm hoping it will be a good fit because of XYZ, or you can go writing with your pitch. I personally wanted to go writing with my pitch because I feel like I have a good pitch for the book. If, say, you're querying an agent who had liked your pitch in a pitch contest or who you'd spoken to at a conference and they'd said, hey, query me, then you might want to say, like, I'm querying this to you because of blah, blah, blah. But I never had that. I was just like cold querying with no prior introduction, and I personally felt that my pitch is more engaging than just details about my book. I wanted to start with the pitch, you know, get an agent on board with the pitch, which I think is the most interesting part, and then at the end to be like, here's the factual stuff, because that's just less interesting. I personally decided to start with a sentence of setting detail. I kind of was viewing the pitch of my query as like a microscopic version of my novel. And I feel like the setting and the atmosphere is such an important part of my novel, and I feel like if anything, it's a selling point of my novel is like the atmosphere and the quality of the setting. And so I decided to begin with a line of setting description in order to kind of cast that atmospheric quality over my query letter and kind of create the same effect, ideally, that the atmosphere would have within the novel. So this paragraph kind of just establishes the inciting incident. The main character's mother and a strange half-sister show up, and then her sister gets struck by lightning. And I really wanted to be super clear about that. There's a clear inciting incident. This is a clear plot that's being set in motion. Again, almost viewing it as a microscopic version of the book structure, right? Clear inciting incident right at the beginning. So then in the second paragraph, I kind of go more into detail on the plot and the plot development. Sybil's family becomes the center of an evolving legend, one where Freya survived by a miracle and Sybil is the angry witch jealous of her sister's divinity. A soft-spoken yet manipulative boy named Whisper is the root of the legends, weaving the stranger and stranger events that strike the town into myth. The more Sybil tries to write the stories about her, the more Whisper villainizes her. The more she tries to protect herself and Freya, the more he rallies their town against her. The more she clings to the truth, the harder it is for her to ignore her own hunger for power. So in this paragraph, I wanted to expand upon the plot and give a sense of what the plot of the book was. One thing that I was really focused on doing here was, through the way I structured this paragraph, kind of showing that this is a well-structured book. I wanted to clearly show conflict, stakes, and escalating tension without necessarily giving away the plot beat. So like in this part here, the more Sybil tries to write the stories about her, the more Whisper villainizes her, the more she tries to protect herself from Freya, etc., etc. Through this, I really wanted to show that I have an active character. Sybil tries to write the stories about her, tries to protect herself and Freya. Those show this is an active character who's going to be an active participant in the plot. And I also, through the sentence structure, wanted to evoke a sense of escalating tension, right? Through the words, the more, like to show that things will continue to escalate and continue to get worse for this character and continue to develop. So I think that in that like body paragraph where you're pitching the plot of your book, I think you can show not only the concept but also the craft by kind of mirroring the pacing and the structure through the sentence structure. Like viewing that as just like a very zoomed down form of my book structure and kind of just really focusing on evoking a sense of conflict and stakes and tension, so that, you know, the query feels gripping the way that the book maybe would feel gripping. And I also wanted to get at a sense of internal conflict, right? The more she clings to the truth, the harder it is for her to ignore her own hunger for power. You know, really through this paragraph, my goal was to just show this is a book with conflict, with stakes, and it's well-paced, and the tension is going to be continually rising. Show that by making this paragraph essentially like the zoomed down, but also in a sense zoomed out version of the middle of my book. So then I just closed off with a final really short paragraph. As the line between herself and the myth told about her blurs, Sybil is faced with her ultimate choice to either become or defy the legacy that's been created for her. So in the previous paragraph, I wanted to show conflict and stakes and structure. Here, my goal was to show this is a cohesive novel with something to say, there are cohesive themes, and in the end it's going to mean something. Like, all of this isn't going to be for naught. We're going to get change or reveal at the end, right? Faced with her ultimate choice, right? So really showing there's going to be purpose to this. It's going to mean something in the end. There's going to be a moment of impact in the end of this book that makes this whole journey worthwhile. So through that whole pitch section of the book, those 3 paragraphs, I was really thinking about mirroring and conveying the structure of my book, but also the craft of my book, and kind of showing like there's a really well-developed sense of conflict here. So then I got into the like factual stuff that I guess you could begin with, but I put at the end here. Honey Vinegar is a literary coming-of-age novel with folkloric elements, complete at 95,000 words, and will appeal to readers of Emily Fridland's History of Wolves, Chelsea Beaker's Godshot, and Otessa Moshfegh's Eileen. Honey Vinegar is #own voices for asexuality. Here, obviously, I just stated the genre and word count, which is something that you always do, and you always say complete at, which I know sounds weird, because obviously it's complete, but that's just like query talk, and you always do that. So then I put some comps. I keep an ongoing list of comps, but I picked those 3 for a reason. So the other comps that I had were The Girls by Emma Cline. I didn't pick that one because it's just such a common comp. Like, literally every book ever written these days is comped to The Girls by Emma Cline. I do think it is a good comp, but it's so overdone that I just feel like I didn't want to use it in my query letter. Our Animal Hearts by Dania Tomlinson is a great comp to my book in terms of vibe, and even like it's also like about folklore, and it's also set in like a small Canadian town, and it's historical fiction. I feel like it's a very niche title, and I didn't want to pick something very, very niche. Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. You know, it also is about this like intersection between life and myth, but I just feel like it's a very different book in many ways in terms of it's so experimental. My book's fairly traditionally told. Greenwood by Michael Christie. It also has this like slightly historical, naturalistic element, but in the end I felt like it was structurally and too different, like it's a family saga. Water Shall Refuse Them by Lucy McKnight Hardy. A similar like main character, this like young, unhinged, repressed violence within this young girl, but it's like quite niche and also horror. The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. I just felt like, again, it was just too different. It's like historical fiction set in a completely other setting. And then the final one is The Cure for Death by Lightning by Gail Anderson Dargatz, which is actually an amazing comp, but I didn't pick it because it's pretty old and I almost felt like it was too close. I felt like that book was almost like too similar. Like, it's also about a girl who gets struck by lightning, and it's like set around the same time period in like around the same region. I read it after I'd written Honey Vinegar. I didn't know that there was a book so similar, but I almost felt like it was too similar, so that's why I didn't pick it. However, after having read the book, when my agent emailed me to say that like she had finished reading the book and she wanted to set up a call to talk about it, she said that it reminded her of The Cure for Death by Lightning, which I thought was interesting because I had almost used it as a comp. I'd always felt that it was perhaps the best comp that there was to the book, but just one that I hadn't used. So that left me with the 3 comps that I picked, which were History of Wolves, Godshot, and Eileen. So why did I pick those 3? All 3 of them are coming-of-age, first-person retrospective narratives about young women looking back on a transformative time from their youth. They felt like structurally and formatively they had the same quality. And I felt like each of them indicated a different quality of the book. So I picked History of Wolves because I feel like it has that naturalistic atmospheric tension and uneasiness that my book has. Godshot, first of all, because it's a really recent title, indicates the state of the market. I picked that one because it has that like culty, mythic vibe, which is present in my book. And then I picked Eileen because it has this like really dark, angry, edgy female narrator, which my book has. So I felt like each of those books kind of represented a different quality that my novel has, all under the same like formative umbrella. And then I just said its own voices for asexuality, which apparently we're not like really using the term own voices anymore. It's kind of been removed, but I didn't really know what else to use. Maybe could have said like the main character's asexuality is written from my own lived experience or something, but in a way that's also not really true because nothing in the book is really written from my lived experience. She's just asexual and it isn't even really talked about. Then I went into my bio. I earned my BA in writing from my university and currently work in publishing as a content marketer. I have an active and growing audience of over 92,000 subscribers on my writing focused YouTube channel, Shilin Writes. My short fiction has appeared in The Fiddlehead, The Puritan, Prism International, Manila Review, Room, The New Quarterly, The Common, Carousel, Plenitude, and elsewhere. I was longlisted for the 2021 CBC Short Story Prize. For a query letter, I have probably a longer bio than most because I write and publish short fiction. If you don't do that and this is like your first venture into publishing, that's fine if you don't have other publishing credits to share. A lot of people in their bio will just say where they live and what they do for work and like a fact about themselves. I was also submitting this query letter through a form, not as an email. And so there was a character limit. And so I felt like I'm not going to take up space with like a fact about myself. Like I do remember having to make some edits. I think there was in the first paragraph or the second paragraph, I had to tweak a few things because it was over the character limit. So I wasn't going to waste space with like a cute fact about myself when I feel like I have publishing credentials that like show my skill. And I also, I said my job because I work in publishing, so like I do know a lot about the publishing industry. I honestly was really back and forth on whether or not I was going to mention my YouTube channel, if I'm honest. I almost didn't mention it, and that's because I guess I have this like fear that when I publish a book, people will say, oh, you only got a book deal because of your channel. And I will tell you, as someone with a book currently on submission, editors do not care. They're not clawing over each other to buy my book just because I have 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. They really are not. But I know that that's something that people will say, and it's something that I've already gotten messages and comments about. And if you publish a book, it's only because of your channel, and you're not actually a good writer. So I almost didn't want to put it in my query letter, just so that I could say I did not get an agent because of my channel, even though I know that that's not why. I personally know that that's not why, but I know that people will say that, and I just wanted to like protect myself from that. But then at the same time, I was like, it's hard for me to view this channel as an accomplishment sometimes, I feel like, but it is an accomplishment and it is something that I've built. And I was just like, you know what, it's okay to like be proud of it. This is something that you did and that you built. So I included it. In the end, I was like, I'm not gonna let my weird anxieties get in the way. So that was my bio. And then I just said, thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Shailen Bishop. And that was my query letter, and that was how I wrote my query letter. Pretty straightforward. It all came together pretty easily because I had all the pieces written already, so I just kind of had to assemble it and then, tweak it and in order to fit the word count and make everything flow nicely. Along with this, I also did submit a writing sample. It was also through an online form, and so I basically just copied the first chapter of my book, pasted it in, and saw where it cut off. And it cut off one paragraph after a section break. So there was a section break and then like the beginning of the next scene. So I just trimmed the beginning of the next scene. And luckily it ended where it cut off. Ended on like what I think is like one of the best paragraphs in the book in terms of writing quality. So I was like, okay, this works really well. So that was my query letter. I truly hope this video will be gracing your subscription feed because I've tried to make it literally so many times. I do want to emphasize real quickly that I know my querying journey was not the norm, and it usually does take more than one query letter. So I don't want anyone to feel like this is the norm, and if you're going into querying, you should expect to send a lot more queries than just 2 queries. And you should expect a lot more rejection and a time frame longer than 2 weeks. For me, it was a 2-week time frame, which was wild, but that was not the norm, and I don't want to make it seem like it's the norm, but it is the truth of what happened to me. Like, that is just that was my life and that was my story, but it is definitely not the norm, and I do recognize that. So it is good to keep your expectations in check, and I definitely was braced for a lot of rejection, and even if it doesn't happen, it's going to happen at some point. And then the other quick thing I just want to say is, you know, this is just how I wrote my query letter, but if you are querying your book, don't just take my word for it. Do more research from people who do know better than me. I did consider getting a professional query letter review before I queried, but in the end I did feel my query was very strong, so I ended up not doing that. But if you're not confident, that's definitely an option. You can run it by people. It is a very important document, and it's really important that it's as strong as possible. I think I just had a lot of, you know, valuable experience on my side to help me craft this. The query letter for me was kind of essentially already written because I had this pitch. Like, I had originally written the pitch in a class, right, when I was first writing the book, and I'd just been fine-tuning it for years, and I already had my bio. So for me, it was pretty easy to assemble. So that's all for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!